Hi, it's Brendan from Crane Appliance. Since 1983, our goal as a family-owned company has been simple: to give our neighbors on the Cape and Islands a great shopping experience. Rest easy knowing our professional team will listen to your needs and help you pick the perfect appliances for your home. At Crane Appliance, we know how difficult appliance shopping can be. Our team is here for you. Crane Appliance. We call the Cape and Islands home.
Carlson Printing, 508-548-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing, for all your printing needs. John's Liquor Store, 729 Main Street, Falmouth, 508-548-2287.
Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is Monday, January 6, 2025 at exactly 5 p.m. And to begin this meeting, I would ask that everyone please silence your cell phones and double check that indeed they are silenced. And secondly, if you are making an audio or video recording of this meeting, of this open meeting session, please notify me as the chair. And the placement and operation of the recording equipment should not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does the ZBA need to open their meeting?
Yes.
I'll turn it over to the chair.
I need a motion to open a meeting.
So moved.
I move a joint meeting with the Falmouth Board of Selectmen.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and at this time, I will turn it over to both the chair of the ZBA and also our liaison, Scott Zelinski.
So, thank you, everybody, for coming. As a liaison to the zoning board, over some of their workshops, and with some of the new rules and regulations, and the fact that we've never been in some of the situations we're in, the board felt that it would be constructive to have a meeting with us to be able to ask some questions that they have concerns about and get things on the record, because we're on such unfamiliar ground right now with the legislation, with the state, with how this works, with time frames and all of that. And stop me, Suzanne, if I go astray with the description. But as a liaison and with our new training and all of that, there's only so many things that I can interject as a liaison rather than bring it to the board. So this is my attempt to bring their concerns in their totality to the board, concerns and questions, and have someone here to be able to answer. And that's basically all this is it's an initial attempt to try to check some boxes with both boards. So with that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
My turn. The town of Falmouth is now in safe harbor. It gives us the ability to even further help with affordable housing. previously, we've been pretty much handcuffed. We're told how the project will go, pretty much. I mean, there's a few things we can tweak here and there, but not much. Location, you know. But this gives us the opportunity to negotiate. And there's quite a few benefits. I don't know if you want me to list them all now or if you want to discuss it later, but there's a lot of benefits to the town. And I was going to start off by asking each and every one of you what safe harbor means to you individually for the town. If I could do that, if you could start.
Sure. I think maybe what you were actually just getting at is it gives us the ability to pursue diverse housing, affordable housing, in the way that is best for the town and in the way that we as a town think is best, not in the way that a developer thinks is best for us.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the same thing you said, Chair, and same thing Ms. Goldstone said. But it also gives us an opportunity to sit down with developers and try to work with them, you know, to come up with the best plan possible for the town, addressing affordable housing, attainable housing, market rate housing. So I think it gives us, you know, an ability to work with developers, and I think that's a positive.
Yeah, I think it gives us an opportunity to make better projects, because they're still gonna come, they're still gonna wanna, you know, exploit the landscape and make their money. But, you know, we had a developer in here a couple of weeks ago who had a nice, good-looking project, and, but it was all targeted for 80% or 100% or, you know, market value. And I asked him if he could include some 60%. And he said, no, I just can't do it. I just don't want to be paying that, you know, mortgage on those properties and getting a lower reduced rate all forever. But I think that somehow we need to figure out how we can do that, make that, if it's a tax incentive, or we just say, hey, if you want to do this project, you're going to have to include it, because I really feel like it's important that we diversify the income range on these projects and not relegate all the lower income people to be stuck in, you know, one big building somewhere, because that's not going to help them get ahead. You know, they need to be in a place where there's other people that have different, diverse economic opportunity.
And I agree with everything my colleagues have said, and the only thing I would just add is that moving forward with badly needed housing in this town, making sure that we have some say in how it meets the needs of our town and how we define those needs.
You all set?
Yes.
Given that I've sat on both tables, and I've sat with your group, I understand that there's a lot of frustration when there are things that are proposed that are backed by the state, and we, you know, we talk and we bang our fist about having to change legislation. What I think is good about this is, with all the things that the zoning board can see that can be corrected through the cases that you've sat on, all the hearings, all the things that went right, all the things that went wrong. This short moment in time gives that your board, in my opinion, the ability to refine your process and help this board, and I'm speaking solely for myself, but hopefully from the rest of my colleagues, that they will understand that you have a job, you're a quasi-judicial board, and you have a job to do. And we put our faith in you to interpret the bylaw the best way we see fit, because we can't do your job and our job. And that's strictly how I feel. The people that I suggest to put forth, I put that faith in. But then I'm done with you. We can want all we want. I can want a Ferrari, but I don't have one. So getting an open line of communication, because you guys can't talk to anybody ever. It seems like you're either in, you know, waiting for appeal, or you can't talk to each other. This is a perfect opportunity, without being confrontational or adversarial, to get out your concerns and for us to be able to answer them the best way we see fit, or get answers for those questions. Nothing's going to get done in 1 hour, but this is a great first step to everybody pulling on the same end of the rope. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, can I
Yes.
add one thing that I think we all agree on, but I want to make explicit, which is what safe haven does not mean.
Harbor.
Safe harbor does not mean, and it does not mean that we are done with affordable housing or have enough housing in our community. We still need to be working on creating enough housing and a diversity of housing in our community.
I agree. I just jotted down the benefits if you want to hear them. We now have the ability to negotiate the location, like sewerage, like near downtown. You're not on an island in the middle of town where you can't even walk to anything. We would like the ability to negotiate the percentages of the AMI. That's for you, Doug. We will have the ability to negotiate the number of affordable units. Right now, we get 4 out of a big project, 5 sometimes,
25%.
25%. We can, the ZBA can now have input on design, open space, snow, parking, traffic. There's so many things we are allowed to speak up about, which is wonderful. We will have input on density, which is huge. And we'll have, most importantly, the input on nitrogen and the wastewater, which we have none now. So those are just the benefits that I don't know if my other board members have other benefits, but that was the list I just jotted down. And then, I don't know if anyone up here wants to ask a question. I thought we could all ask a question of you, and then we could get to the lip process, if that's okay?
Sure.
Anybody want to start up here? Tony?
I'd like to understand how the board, most of Falmouth is in a nitrogen-sensitive area. And our Board of Health is doing a very good job of trying to get to where we need to get to with IA systems in the future of septic systems going forward. We're not going to sewer the whole town, but we have sewer coming in. There are projects, 40Bs, that'll come up that won't even be able to tie into the sewer line as it goes by. We can't talk about addresses, but as it goes by, that sewer line can't even tie into it. But I'd like to understand, and this is an opportunity for us to be able to deal with nitrogen-sensitive areas in a way that we couldn't do before, to cover 247.2 and what goes on beyond that. I'd like to know what each board member believes we should be doing with regard to permitting in nitrogen-sensitive areas. However,
Who wants to tackle first?
I would say that the Water Quality Management Committee, with conjunction with the Board of Health, is now trying to come up with whether or not they want a 300 or whatever it is foot area from any wetland or estuary to have nitrogen, mandates. Mashpee is 1,000 feet from any wetland, so they're a little ahead of us on that. I think it should be something that's already built into the towns, whether it's the health department or the water quality management. Shouldn't really be something that you have to struggle with, but for now, you probably will.
Just to respond to that, in the LIP review guidelines, it says that they have to reduce nitrogen, yet the projects are coming to the select board, and I guess that you all have your own opinion, you're all gonna have your own thought process. If and when you do support it, I guess I'd like, at least in my personal opinion, at least there's a disclaimer that you endorse it, you like it, but it still has to go through all of the formal boards for approvals and things. It kind of makes it a little bit more difficult, even though we are a separate board, bound only by the bylaws that are in the book that we utilize for our reviews of projects.
And Mass State law.
And Mass State laws. But that continues to be in the LIP, speaking of LIPs, is currently, it says to reduce nitrogen, yet we're getting a lot of projects that just aren't doing that. So again, I appreciate, as you mentioned, additional setbacks and things like that. But again, when you're looking at LIPs, to Tony's point, has that box been checked off? And I know Jed and Kim are doing a great job in bringing these projects and meeting with the applicants to make sure that they fully understand some of the hurdles that they might get into. But it is more difficult, like, for me as a board member, as potentially a LIP would come before us. It's been kind of reported in the papers that, hey, select board's really on board with this. Okay, that's great, and we appreciate you doing your due diligence, but our board still has additional due diligence, and I think reduction of nitrogen should be at the head of that, and I would love for the Board of Health to quite honestly move more expeditiously and say, if there's a new dwelling in the town of Falmouth, that's just a cost to doing business. Not everybody needs granite countertops or quartz countertops. Maybe they have to reduce the house by 50 square feet, but you have to do something to help us on our wastewater side of it. And so hopefully that, again, and we're gonna get everybody's guidance. Those things are important for me to hear from the select board is, you know, what can you articulate to us how much affordable housing is a target for us? Yeah, it's great, we're at 10%, but we all want more. Everybody here in this room wants more affordable housing, but it's gotta come to, in my estimation, our board, in a sense that it's something that's approvable also. Because it makes it very difficult when we're trying to wrestle with density and things like that that might not have been fully vetted. So I appreciate your thoughts.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
So I would say that I think we need to do some more work on our policy for LIP applications now that we have this new opportunity. I think that's part of why we're here today, because I don't want us to handicap you by having an advanced meeting to discuss a LIP application, and we, like you said, we're sort of already on board and already endorsing it. So if we're gonna be endorsing it, it should be something that's already a quality project with taking into consideration that nitrogen management.
Well, I think the process that we've agreed upon, you know, gets us to that point with our recommendation to the town manager, and then, you know, it comes to the select board. So I'm not sure we need to, you know, change the policy at this point. I think the policy is pretty well set, is what's expected of that advisory group and what the process is. So,
Well, I'll give you an example that we talked about last week. The developer came in and I asked him here, while we were pretty far into the process, if he would include the 60%. It wasn't about nitrogen, but I'm just saying that he was already
well, I mean,
in a mode for, you know, he already had his pro forma, he already knew what he was gonna be doing. So I think the policy, like say, you need to include a 60%, or you need to have nitrogen removal, whatever, more guidance for the working group so that they know what the ground rules are, what we really are expecting.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Bob, I think you might have misspoke, but they're not an advisory board. They're a quasi-judicial board. They can do what they want and then have to deal with us after the fact. They're not advisory.
I'm talking about the LIP advisory work group.
Oh, my mistake then, yeah.
No, I know what their responsibility is.
If I may.
Go ahead.
I personally understand that there's frustration and confusion because we task the front office, that's part of our strategic plan, is to create workforce housing. Doesn't mean every project is the right project. And I've told people in the past while I was there and while I've been here, you all have a vote when you feel it is not the right thing, and it can't be everyone. You have to work this process because it's a balancing act. But don't be afraid to say no and hold people's feet, mainly the applicants, to the fire on occasion. Now, there are companies out there that evolve with what you require as a board. I've seen it myself, where you don't have to go through the semantics of the pressure and the posturing and all of that. There are some companies, some may even be here, that come in with a set of findings and a set of rules that help you govern what your decision's gonna be and adjust that. But know that it's all right to vote against something. Just don't make it a habit and don't use it as a stick. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Goldstone?
Yeah, I just, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is a need for clearer goals and guidelines. And I'm seeing nodding, so, okay, message received. And I would agree that those are things that we should be working on. I mean, to the question of how much is enough in terms of affordable housing or attainable housing, and then, you know, you get into the gradations of different income levels and types of housing, like, those aren't numbers we have. They're obviously not easy numbers to come up with, but the housing production plan, I think, starts to point us in that direction, right? It at least gives us a target of a number of units per year that we need to be producing. But I agree. I think those are numbers and questions that we need to be working on answering.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Frank, do you have any questions?
Well, I think that Heather's comment about despite the fact that we're in safe harbor, 40Bs are not going to go away, and we're going to continue to get them. And it's important to remember that in order to stay in safe harbor, we have to continue to produce affordable housing every year. We have a certain amount that we have to produce every year, and I'm assuming we're going to get applications that will probably allow us to do that. But it's very important that we not lose sight of the fact that we still need affordable housing. The 10% doesn't really satisfy the requirement or the need for it, the public need for it. One thing that I would like to bring up, it's not necessarily related to what we've talked about before, but when we get a project in, and this is when we get a 40A or a 40B, we send out referrals to all town departments. And sometimes we get very cursory responses back. And I know that when we have asked other town departments for their analysis or their assistance, at least I think sometimes we really don't get necessarily the in-depth analysis we might be looking for, because we do need the assistance of other town departments. So I would kind of ask that you as a board perhaps send the word out to the town departments that when they get a referral from the Board of Appeals, that they sit down and sharpen their pencil and give us their best effort because when we make a decision, we can't just pull it out of thin air. We have to have something on the record that we can rely on to support it. And that's just a comment that I would make. I know I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but I think if you, as a Board of Selectmen, looking at or taking responsibility to ask the other town departments to really give us a little bit more in-depth analysis when they are responding to referral, it would be very helpful.
Madam Chairs, is your town manager, and I message heard, I was under the impression that was getting perhaps a little better, but evidently we're still missing on some counts. So that, as the town manager, I will make sure that going forward, the town departments.
That would also, I think we as a board should feel confident or comfortable asking a member of the board or a department head to come to us and talk to us about their referral. We're not going to do that all the time, but there are certain cases where, like, for example, we may have a referral where there's traffic issues. We might want to speak to somebody from the police department and actually have them come and talk to us and educate us about what the problems are in that neighborhood, rather than just send us a paragraph or two on a piece of paper.
What is the requirements for that legally? I mean, are they required? I mean, it's not like a subpoena for a hearing, but if they request that a department head or someone from a certain division be present for a meeting, can they make a request through your office? How does that work, or does it even work like that? Can they make that request directly?
I think it's being made now, and I second that recommendation. I'm not aware of any other community that relies solely on written testimony for ZBA approvals.
No, I mean,
live testimony is eminently better than a paragraph written on a page.
Or referrals at all. Sometimes they come in without even any referral, no comment.
Right, we get no comments, but also, remember now, we have peer review engineers looking at our projects, but they're not from Falmouth. They're from somewhere else, and they don't really know the community or its needs the way some local department head might. So I think it would be very helpful if we had more community input in the form of referrals and input from department heads who have specific knowledge of the facts that we're looking for.
As often as not, that issue arises during the application, or the hearing process. And I mean, we don't realize what we need, and in defense of the department, they probably didn't anticipate it either. I mean, so a more seamless transition, between question and answer would help us considerably. I mean, you can't expect them to divine everything that is our concern, because oftentimes, as I say, it just comes up in the process. And it hasn't been that bad. I mean, we requested and received, help that we needed, but we need more occasionally.
Can you do me a favor?
Anything you want.
Can you stop clicking your pen while, because I watch every meeting, and that's all I can hear is your pen clicking.
Said as well.
No, but you're exactly right. And that's why meetings last so long, because they request information and then they have to wait for that to come back, and then they have to get, but keeping in mind, they're on a time schedule. Once their hearings start, the clock starts ticking, so some things, some decisions that are made, I don't know if everybody is aware of that, they have to watch the clock on everything they do. And then, again, they can't speak to each other, so they have nobody else to bounce it off of, so.
And that was a concrete.
As, referencing the referrals, the zoning board in the 40B process is tasked with taking the place of all other local boards, including the select board, and only excluding Board of Health and Conservation. So if the zoning board is looking at a property that, for example, is historic, it's critical that we have input from the Historical Commission, because they are the most knowledgeable body that would know, hey, if this was before you, how would you act? And now their reply does not mandate that the zoning board follow it, but it gives the board guidance. And so it's a very weighty process for the zoning board to stand in literally everybody else's stead and make sure there's no misstep.
Anything else from the board on that suggestion? Sounds like a doable, concrete suggestion.
Thank you.
Mr. Duffy, thank you for that.
Is there a way we can, trigger, when you send out that request, do you copy somebody in the town manager's office? Okay, so they'll know. Okay.
What's the timing usually? I mean, how much time do the departments have to get back to the ZBA?
Yeah, so if I may, when 40B is filed, we're required to open the hearing within 30 days. So immediately, we have to send out referral requests, but we also, that triggers notice to newspapers, mailing to abutters, and so all of those things take time, and it's very obviously condensed when you have anybody to set up a meeting. 30 days to get all of that in place is pretty short. That being said, typically those hearings are all continued, but the law also, with their lovely idea of condensed time, expects all the referring boards to reply within a certain period of time, or they essentially forego their opportunity.
And that's 30 calendar days, that's not 30 work days.
Right. So it's important that we get input quickly, but because the board cannot independently, for example, call engineering and say, hey, I'm struggling with this, can you help me? Because then only one board member has that information. So it's more important for us to get representatives that appear so that they can answer questions. And it also opens it up, which is the intent of this whole process, to the public. The public gets to hear what that particular committee member or engineering or whatever, what they have to say about the project. So, and again, when it comes down to a final decision and whether something's appealed, if you don't have that information in your record, you have nothing to stand on. So it's just critical that we have all the pieces in there.
Can you just explain a little bit? So when the developer comes in, they first see you and they tell you, I want to build 32 houses and I'm on 4 acres or whatever it is, does that trigger you to take action, or do you then have to bring it to the board and then they say, okay, get all these referrals? How does
No,
that
so
work?
the trigger happens with the actual filing of the application. But because there's so much involved in the filing of an application, and Falmouth do a lot of outreach with developers, so oftentimes they'll have met with housing development group, or talk to the town planner or myself or housing, or go through the LIP process with you. So typically, there's already sort of pre-filing contact, as well as they have to get that project eligibility letter from the state. So even if everything is totally in secret and in the dark, you have some advance notice because you get that notification.
What does that
from the
mean? What
state.
did, you just said secret and in the dark. What are you talking about?
I'm just saying, if somebody didn't come and meet with the town initially, if they were just doing planning all on their own.
Oh, all right.
And they never reached out to anybody, they still have to file with the state, and the state would trigger a letter to the town.
I understand, thank you.
And so does that letter to the town, for instance, does that say, if you see it's in a historic district, do you take it upon yourself then to reach out to the historic commission, or is there a meeting first? I'm just wondering how cumbersome the process is.
So we have a referral process, and Ashley, my assistant, is wonderful with that. And so whenever an application comes in, she automatically distributes referral requests to all of these various departments.
Okay, so it's automatic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
May I just, Madam Chair, may I just say something on that? A developer, and some of this was covered, the project eligibility letter is a expensive process for the developer. And it's a lot of work when they file for that. And when they finally do get the project eligibility letter, that is, as Maureen mentioned, is what triggers the opportunity to file for a comprehensive permit. And of course, the comprehensive, some of these folks can spend $50,000, $80,000 or more dollars, depending on the size of the project, before they ever get in front of us. And then on top of that, they have to pay for our peer engineers and other things that Maureen is more aware of than I am. But there's a lot of money spent, and that's where I think that we, as a community, have to be very sharp in how we deal with our pre-LIP process. And one of the things that might be helpful, and it's up to you folks, because I read your LIP process, is that you outline, and maybe you do this, is that you give the developer, whoever it is, very clear directions as to what you're looking for, and I suspect you do that. But one of the things that might help in that process is understanding, well, I can only speak for myself, how I, or any board member, actually approach a 40B application, how we do our research, what are we looking for, what triggers our questions. And that could be, it could be as simple as, you know, the architectural style. We have a right to talk about the architectural style. Mass Housing has a guidebook. It's not a very good guidebook, but we can actually talk about that. We can talk about landscaping and screening. We can talk about abutting properties. But one of the things that is of great concern, I think, certainly to me, is how do we affect the abutters? What negative effect do we have on the abutters?
Tony, that's up to you guys.
And I realize
Once it
that,
gets before you, I mean, for you to ask us that question, it's immaterial, because we don't make that call.
No, I know that, but what I'm trying to say is this. You have a LIP process that's going to, a developer goes through, and he or she is going to spend a lot of money to get there. And if you could dial them in as to what's going to be expected of them now that we're in safe harbor, because we can look at things a little differently now.
That, again, is going to be up to you, in my opinion, by the way you do your business and the way you govern your board.
If I may just jump in for a moment, since I am part of the, the advisory group. I will say that in a number of instances, the group, in the person of Kim and/or Jed, will let the developer know some of the things that the zoning board will be interested, and not necessarily part of our decision, that's not our domain, but it comes out in those discussions, Tony, that, this is something the zoning board may be looking at. So to the extent that we're able to give some information or that heads up, I think, the group tends to do that as much as we can.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson-Stott?
Yeah, if I might just follow up on that. I agree with both members of the select board that certainly all of those details about architecture and abutter impacts, that's exactly what the ZBA is there to decide on, not the select board. However, that said, as Mr. Mascali indicated, if we receive from the ZBA, here's some concise things that we're going to be looking for specifically with LIP applications, we could, as part of the, before it even comes to the advisory group, that's something that staff could get to the developers at the very beginning of the process before they start spending money on design. So I think there may be an opportunity, again, not for the select board to decide on design guidelines and abutter
Talking about a
impacts.
list of requirements that they're gonna, as a basic
If the
entry point.
ZBA, right, if the ZBA can provide some concise, these are things, guidelines, these are things we're going to be looking for when we, the ZBA, review this LIP. If we get that information to the developers early, that may be helpful.
Right down to, far too many times in my experience, you'll get an application that isn't even completed. One of my mentors back in the day, that was the first thing that they looked at. And if it didn't happen, if there's a yes or no answer, then there should be an answer on there, one way or the other. And to have to chase those is time-consuming and convoluting in itself. So basic things like that really do make sense. This is a list of prerequisites that we're going to be looking for across the board.
I'm going to go to Ms. Goldstein.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I want to make sure I'm understanding. I think what you were maybe requesting was, so when we, as a board, vote to endorse a LIP application, just because we endorse something, because on the whole, we think it is the right kind of project, not all of the details are right, but the right kind of project to go forward, doesn't mean that there aren't some concerns. And so is what you're asking for some of those concern points to be more formally documented in that endorsement, right? Like in the letter that we end up sending, endorsing it, to say, we're endorsing this, but, with potential concerns about density or renewable energy or something like that, that points in certain direction. Is that what you're looking for?
May I
I know
answer?
that I watch your LIP process. I watch the applicants come in, and there's sometimes no questions. Sometimes you don't even ask questions. That's happened. Maybe
Chair.
one question. Doug asked one last time about the percentage of that gentleman. Sometimes there's not even any questions. I'm sitting at home going, oh my God, because exactly, I would feel you would dig a little deeper.
But in your defense, I mean, you'd have to be quite familiar with how we approach things, and it's a long and difficult process. And I mean, for us to expect you to do in 15 minutes what it takes us 6 weeks to do, I mean,
Or more.
is unrealistic. But I mean, any little thing would help, and even just preparing the applicant, because it seems some applicants keep things as loose as possible, so they can, benefit themselves and their bottom line.
But we also live in the world with respect to zoning that everything out of your mouth is possibly appealable too, no matter where it comes from. That may slip out at the end. So
That's the truth.
at a hearing personally, I know that I'm not in my lane for that, so I don't do that I don't try to act as, a zoning member during a LIP.
No,
Trust in the fact that it's gonna go to the right place, and that's gonna be taken care of. That's how I look at it as an individual member.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Brown and Ms. Goldstone.
So I would think that, the LIP is really our responsibility, because that's our opportunity to negotiate with the developer. They are the regulatory aspect of it, but we're like, let's make a deal. If you want to give us a little more affordability or some lower income level affordability. That's where we can negotiate, and I think a lot of that needs to be spelled out in a policy for the LIP application. If we want to modify it, I think that's our responsibility.
Ms. Goldstone?
So I have some concerns with where the conversation feels like it's been going, because we are two separate boards with two different jurisdictions and roles, and what I don't want us to do is step on your toes or constrain you or hamper your process. But it sounds like you're looking for a little bit more guidance, and what we have is 15 review guidelines. We have the town's strategic plan, and in my mind, when a LIP application is coming to us, we're reviewing for alignment with those 15 LIP application guidelines and the strategic plan. And so, right, maybe to say, okay, this aligns really well with 10 of these. There's a couple places where we have some concerns with whether this aligns with the LIP guidelines or our strategic plan. I personally wouldn't feel comfortable going much further than that in any sort of specificity about any specific project, because that's your jurisdiction, right? So I guess that's just kind of how I look at the application and endorsement process.
Mr. Scally, and then I'll
You
come
know,
to you.
again, back to the most recent LIP that we're talking about, you know, when that gentleman came in originally, he had his plans, and we discussed it, and he added affordable units to what he originally thought was going to be the what he originally wanted. So there is that opportunity, and, you know, but there comes a point where, you know, the developer has to make up a mind whether to, as you explained, you know, to us the other night. So, I mean, I think the advisory group does look to see what we can get from the developer to help, you know, the town meet its affordability requirements, so. But it's, you know, it's really just starting. I mean, we're learning from this, and we'll take all of this, you know, and assimilate it and use it going forward.
Go ahead.
I agree to a certain extent. I think it would be incumbent upon the applicant, rather than us dig things out of them, for them to be open about what they would be willing to do as part of their presentation. I'm open to more affordability. I'm open to a lower level of nitrogen loading. Very rarely do we have a first-time applicant up there. They know how this goes. And on some occasions, the things that are left open to interpretation is where things get messed up down the line.
Did you?
And we all have a vote. Even on a LIP application, we can vote no if we don't like the way it's going.
One of the things that I look forward, going forward with LIP applications is it allows now 5 extra sets of eyes as well as several working groups to review applications. Clearly, your findings are going to indicate, okay, these are checking off the right boxes on this criteria. What would be helpful for me, and hopefully for other members of the board, is if there are issues that you're not going to be able to vet during the time period you have it, please pass them up to us so that when we're starting to have formal hearings for hours as opposed to 15 minutes, we can either ask the questions, vet them out to town boards, ask for specific input from town boards, but that way we can resolve issues of local concern. Now that we're in safe harbor, all of those local issues that used to take a back seat because people could appear to the hack, we can bring them to the forefront. We can negotiate or we can deny depending on what the issue might be. So raising the issues so that we can properly vet them as a board would be very helpful, personally would be very helpful for us.
Well, do you
actually get the answers?
Go ahead, Mr.
Do you feel like that's not being done? Because I've seen the letters that go out after our initial meetings, and I think they are very thoughtful, and they do have a lot
that this
of.
town does a very good job at vetting things, but in the 7 years I've been on the board, people catch things that 5, 6 other members that staff don't catch. So as many eyes on a project, or especially, and everyone brings a different point of view, catching mistakes, catching issues, catching unintended consequences or problems a year, 6 months, 5 years down the road, it's important. Everyone lives in different parts of the town. Everyone has a finger on the pulse of a particular community. some better than others of different parts of town. So the more eyes reviewing a project about the potential impact issues is very helpful for the board.
James, you don't think that vetting something prior to a hearing being open puts your board in jeopardy if you're trying to vet something ahead of its filing?
I'm a little bit
And
more.
then after its filing, you can't talk about it anyway. So how, you're not supposed to work outside your board, that's what the law says. So if you're pre-vetting, that would exclude you, in my opinion, to have to recuse yourself because you've done work prior to the application's inception.
I'll defer to Maura, but I would suggest that as part of the LIP, we're going to get your referral from Affordable Housing.
I'm talking about your board vetting prior to an issuance.
We would be, we're not vetting.
Well, that's how I heard that.
I'm looking at a finding that would be submitted as part of the LIP application stating, this is the concerns that the select board has, these are the reasons why we're endorsing the project. We can then look at that and say, all right, well, here's 4 or 5 concerns, let's talk about this with the developer when they come in front of the zoning board.
Mr. Johnson-Staub?
Let's be clear, we do no vetting.
No.
Yeah, so, I just wanted, for the public, I think the ZBA members are aware, you received as part of the application review process that we actually do have in our evaluation form, we do have some general sort of guidance from the ZBA included in that. And, and we're looking at those issues to try to identify them. But I just want to speak to the viability of the select board screening for things like design and abutter impacts, because remember, your board does really important, complicated, in-depth reviews of building applications. This board deals with 50 different subject matters, right? So for this board to sort of really do, if you're relying on them to identify, abutter issues, and in some cases they find one and they mention it, in other cases they don't, and then there is one, I'm not sure that's fair to the select board. I'm not sure that's realistic. I think maybe at some level staff screening can identify some really glaring issues, and then we need to separate what the roles of the two boards are. And this board's going to be focused on policy goals, whether they're housing goals or environmental goals. And then your board is really the one that's going to have to focus on things like design and abutter impacts. And I think those are the two different roles of the two boards. And I hear you. It would be great if this board had a lot of excess time to do a first vet of those issues so that you could then do a final vet. But I'm just not sure that's realistic.
As the process goes along and we deal with more of these, some of these things will come to light and you'll be cognizant of them. This should be like the first of kind of like regular, if not meeting or correspondence, we have to familiarize each other with, what we can possibly do to move this process along in a better and a smoother with a better outcome. But it's kind of in flux, just like the nitrogen issue. It's very difficult to be on this board.
I imagine.
Did you want to say something?
I was
Mr.
just
Brown?
going to say, reflecting back on like 375 Sandwich Road, we did give a very thoughtful.
Hold on, is that out of appeal yet?
It's not, we can't relate to it?
No.
All right, just saying, it's just an example of our letter that we sent in advance, and I thought it was pretty well done.
You could say a certain project or whatever, you just can't be that specific.
I'd like to follow up on Mr. Johnson-Staub's comments and also on the comments of Ms. Goldstone in terms of us being two distinct boards with distinct focus on the work that we do. And I'd like a little more clarification around the roles and responsibilities when it comes to LIP applications for the select board moving forward. It is new to us. I'd like a little more information, like I said, from town council and town manager so that I can have a better understanding of what our role is moving forward.
I think if it might help a little bit, there are certainly guidelines that will help with that, but one of the interests in LIP is that the select board actually becomes a partner in the application. So I just want to make sure that the select board understands what the state sort of draws out for the LIP process, and that also developers, if they have support from the select board, they will walk forward to the zoning board with sort of a mandate, if you will, that, you know, the select board endorses, so therefore the zoning board should. And obviously.
Is that what that means?
That's what it's implied.
Let
Yeah.
They have a
let me
little
finish.
chip.
Legally, is that what that means, town council? That's what I need that's exactly what I want clarification on. What does an endorsement from this board mean moving forward? If you're saying we're partners on the application, I need to have more information about that.
We'll provide some guidance.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we've had instances in the past where we've tried to enter into a LIP, and the minute a question has been asked, in not so many words, we've been told, well, I don't need you anyway. So that happens a lot.
I've heard that.
So
We've heard
that's
that.
what you're up against
So
as
this-
well.
But this idea of us being partners, and so because we endorse it, then the zoning board should endorse, that's news to me. And so that's why I want more guidance around that.
So just as clarification, the state does not indicate that the zoning board must follow if the select board grants or endorses a LIP, that the zoning board must say yes. But certainly the developers will come forward with that as, you know, a ticket in their pocket.
I understand that as leverage, but what you said was that the zoning board should. And I just want to understand a little bit more about that prior to us hearing another LIP application.
I think that if you, and I know you guys are all busy, but I think if you follow the process of one or two of these LIPs as they go through us, that's really the only way you're gonna become, you know, familiar with what our asks are and what we're looking for. I mean, it's, again, you can't be expected
And
to
that's-
know.
To see it in action, I
Yeah,
would
to
agree
see it
with
in
you.
action is.
I would agree with you, Mr.
I mean,
Finnan.
you can't
Totally.
expect to know what's gonna go on in our meetings when we don't even know.
And it's too complex to
Mis-
give.
Well, I was just gonna say, we
Yeah,
have
go
a
ahead.
couple of developers in the audience who might be interested to hear their perspective. I don't know, just suggesting. It's an open meeting.
Do you want, Mr. Duffy?
Couldn't hear.
We didn't hear what he said.
I personally think this LIP process is a very valuable process, and the comment that Noreen made about it's perceived sometimes that the select board is a partner in the application. I don't see it as the select board is directing the process at all, but I see you as participating in it, and I think that's very valuable because you can call upon staff to not only look at the application, but also to negotiate changes or improvements in the process or in the application before it gets to you and before it gets to us. I would like to see more LIPs, actually. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I think it's a very valuable process, and I appreciate what you folks do, but you're not directing us to do it. But on the other hand, if you do have some specific concerns about an application that maybe you can't address, let us know and we'll do it. But that's just my feeling, anyways.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson-Staub?
Yeah, I just want to echo something that Mr. Peterson said early on in this conversation, because I think it's a very practical, small but important step that this board can take, which is when we issue a LIP decision, just to have a standard disclaimer, not a review of, you know, we're concerned about this abutter issue or this design issue, but a standard disclaimer that says, we're endorsing this, you know, as a housing project, and I'm not going to wordsmith it correctly here, but, you know, broad strokes, the select board is endorsing this project, but subject to a detailed review by the Zoning Board of Appeals to address all of these, you know, design and abutter issues, so that the ZBA has something to point to if rhetorically a developer tries to use it as a bludgeon that, oh, the select board told you to just approve this thing. No, the select board says we support this project and we support the role of the ZBA to go through its process.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
So, interested to get some feedback on my earlier comments about maybe adjusting our policy, because honestly, when the developer comes to the podium they're pretty far along, because they've been dealing with staff for a while. They have certain assurances that they're on the right track, and when they come to us, I feel like it's not too late, but it's a little late to be asking them to make changes, because when the gentleman was at the podium last time we met here, and I asked him about the 60% affordability, it was already kind of too late at that point. So I'm interested to know if, how we might, ask for more in advance so that we aren't in that position.
So I would say that, I think you're generally right. It's not absolutely too late at that point. It's still fairly early in the process. But at that point, the developer had spent some money in a couple of, several months, I think, and probably 3 or 4 meetings vetting the project. But from my viewpoint, that is a terrific success story, that project. And I think the disconnect is what you were looking for was not in our policy guidance. It wasn't something we were looking for. We weren't looking for 60% AMI for home ownership.
Right.
And we can have more conversations about whether that's a realistic goal, just in terms of the cost of producing the housing.
Mm-hmm.
But the way to make sure that we're not missing opportunities to get select board policy goals fed in to the developer very early on is to go back to those LIP guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So if, they were recently reviewed by the select board, but as we said, this, we're new to Safe Harbor. These are really important. So if the board wants to insert something that isn't there, then we should get them in these guidelines so that staff can address it at the very beginning of the process.
Right, thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I just want to add very briefly that the ZBA, now that they're in Safe Harbor, can deny projects, but they have to make a finding that in order to deny it, that it's not consistent with local needs. That is the legal standard for denying a 40B project under Safe Harbor. And it's your policy goals that determine what the local needs are. Now that they have this ability, finally, in Safe Harbor to actually deny a project without it going to the hack, they need some guideposts to know what those local needs are. When you're talking about affordable housing, that the local need is going to be incredibly intertwined with the actual community. So Falmouth's needs are going to be different in terms of affordable housing because of the constraints we have with the need for nitrogen reduction, for example. So where those issues might have been outside their jurisdiction before, maybe it's so intertwined with the creation of more and more affordable housing that now you can draw the IA systems or some other way to fight the increased nitrogen loading through a creation of what the local needs are. So I do think that looking at your policy and trying to shape them in a way that can help the ZBA define when they can and cannot deny a project will be great, will be really helpful for them.
Right.
If you could, kind of put them on notice that right from the beginning, they should try to design in some flexibility instead of having it set in stone right down to their bottom line, because we might be asking for these things, and rather than lose their project altogether, which is, our right to do if we judge so, they should just, be ready to be more flexible.
Mr. Muscala, you had made a comment to me that perhaps there's
We don't have much time, but we do have a couple of people in the audience, Ms. Monahan, Mr. Galasso, who might have something to add to the discussion, as they would both be, probably
Ms. Moynihan?
coming forward at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura Moynihan from the Falmouth Housing Trust. I see you only have a few minutes. I did prepare some comments, but maybe you all would be willing to take them home. Just make a couple of brief points. As far as the LIP process goes, the select board should absolutely not be the permit review board. The select board is not partnering on a project. They're asking the state to issue a project eligibility letter. They're approving generally the parameters of the project only, that it looks economically feasible, that the site looks generally suitable, that the unit numbers look generally okay. That's all the select board is doing. So, you know, we don't want to get into a process where the select board becomes the pre-review regulatory board of the zoning board. That would be, I think, a mistake, because you're going to get less developers coming to you. I think from the discussion tonight, perhaps the zoning board might think about developing some review guidelines, so that when the applicants are coming forward with the LIP process, the town manager's office and the housing coordinator can say, here are the zoning board review guidelines. When you're designing your project, look to these guidelines, because this is what the zoning board is going to be looking for 6 months from now. That, I don't feel, is in the process. Briefly, my primary concern, our primary concern, is streamlining the permit process. Right now, these comprehensive permits are taking 6 months or more. We have to be more innovative. We have to be more efficient. We are at safe harbor, but that does not mean our crisis is over. And there are lots of ways that we can continue to evolve. We can prioritize affordable housing projects at the zoning board. There's no regulation or authority that says that we can't say 40B projects, they get priority in scheduling. We can update the application, which is about 11 pages long. It's very cumbersome for the developer. I'll give you a copy of the Town of Barnstable's. It's 2 pages with attachments that are required. We can develop digital platforms. We did it for the building department. We can do it for 40B, where applications are filed online, referrals are online, town departments respond online. It's going automatically out to the developers. That will create a lot of efficiency. We can clearly define the scope of peer review, and I'll give you all my comments. I see you're pointing. But the biggest thing I think we can do to help in the efficiency of the process is that we can categorize 40B projects as minor or major. Perhaps a minor project is 3 units or less. A major project is more than that. A minor project through the LIP review could be signed off by the town manager. Does not need to go to the select board, does not need to go to all these committees. Boom, boom, boom. Goes to the town manager, 3-unit project, signed and off to the state. Same with the zoning board. If you have 3 units or less, it gets scheduled in priority. It has a different application. So there are ways that we can improve efficiency. I'd ask you to review my comments in writing, and please consider that we do need to continue to evolve, and we have to do something about the process itself from the permitting perspective. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for all the work that you do. It's not meant as a criticism of that work. It's meant more as we move forward, let's try and find new ways to do this more efficiently, because I think the assumption that you're going to have a lot of developers knocking on your door, I don't think that's correct. I think developers look at towns that are not in safe harbor, and they go to those towns. And if we want developers to come here to continue to build housing, we have to be more efficient, and we have to be willing to work with them and understand what their profit margins are.
Thank you.
We're beyond our time, but I would just like to thank the town manager's office for this executive summary with all the demographics. Very informative.
Very helpful. Okay, for the select board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst the board? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
I make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.